coffee. Well, here we are. We're live, right? And now it even says you are live. That's a new thing that came up. I'm in a new space. Normally, I've been doing a lot of these sessions on Fridays from my client's office here. Shout out to Gupta Evans Ayers, a great law firm here specializing in bankruptcy and real estate and so forth. Been great friends and professional colleagues with AJ for a long time. And so he's in a new office now. So I got a new little side office, new environment that I'm settling into. But how are you, Sue? Happy Friday. And welcome to another installment of Get a Klu in 52 for Speakers with co-author and certified integrity game coach, Sue Mathieson. What's happening? How are you, Sue?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I'm really well. Well, it's Saturday morning, very early for me here in Down Under territory. But no, I've had a great week. It's a lot to be thankful for, and looking forward to what we're going to talk about today.
All right, wonderful. Well, I'm awake. I've got some caffeine going as well, and I'm just always in a jovial mood on Fridays. And I'm always excited about what we're doing. Let's go ahead and get into towards today's tip. We know that overall we're doing Get a Klu in 52 for Speakers. We know this is the fourth Get a Klu in 52 book, right? The original, and then the Entrepreneur Edition, and then the one for coaches, and now this one for speakers. And even though this is for speakers, we want to let everybody know that 60% or actually, 60% of the book is for non-speakers 60%. Alike. Only 40% of the book in the middle is really like, that's for speakers, right? So a lot of the things that speakers have to do are no different from what any of us that have to market ourselves, advance our careers, monitor our businesses, right? So we want you to know this is for speakers and non-speakers alike. And then we've got 5 categories that we're working with. All of the Get a Klu in 52 books are working through 5 categories, 52 tips across 5 categories. So Sue, we got started at the beginning of the year playing the integrity game. Our first 10 tips were all about elaborating on, having discussion around the 10 points of the integrity game model to give us structural integrity and foundation that we can build our speaking path on. Now what we're doing is we're bringing out our brand. So it's almost like, the structure of a home, and then you paint it and decorate it and landscape it. And that's what we're talking about now. And so what we're going to head towards is this middle of the book, starting in about 5 weeks after we get done with 5 more tips, maybe 6 weeks from now. We're going to start section 3, which is be fearless. And what we mean by this is be fearless about going into production on your talk. Right, so 8 steps towards fearless public speaking, plus another 2 tips that make up that section of being fearless. Now, one of those 8 steps is so important that we break it down into 10 other tips that make up section 4. So we get more tactical on the elements, forms, and functions of outlining and organizing our thoughts and setting up our approach to any particular speaking engagement. And then we end the year with practice building. And so quick review. I think I'm going to have to delete some of these banners, but going way back to the beginning, tip number 1 from the integrity game, declare your purpose, and then package your gifts, and then the chronology of potential and making smart even smarter. This is all coming from section 1, the integrity game. Then we went on to strategies, tactics, and resources. And among all of those, what do we commit to? And what's our relationship with our word and our sense of what it means to commit? And what kind of muscle memory are we developing for being action takers? And are we on the learning the hard way end of the continuum, or are we on the proactive learning end of the continuum? Anywhere we are is good, right? But we prefer proactive learning, and then we accumulate accomplishments. We smell our own roses, and we update our resumes, and we keep ourselves current and relevant, update our LinkedIn profiles so that the world always knows what we have available for it, even while we have our eyes set on more that we want to achieve. But at the end of the day, we always need to know who wins when we win. So when we have answers to these 10 questions, we've got a structural integrity. We've got a foundation to build on top of. And that's what brings us to where we are right now in section 2, which is bring out your brand. So a quick review, Sue, of the tips that we've covered in this section, starting with number 11, don't be a spectator. I mean, branding is active, not passive. And that's you get in the game, right? Second thing is we want to know the difference between a brand and branding. I've heard people use these words interchangeably and in ways that confuse me, like I'm going to brand you. Well, brand could be a verb, but in our case, it's a noun compared to the verb of branding, right? And one is the content, the message, the promise, and all of the elements of it that we'll talk about. The other is how we get it out, the channels, the process of getting those messages out into the marketplace. So that led us to this equation that we're working through. We introduced it a couple weeks back in tip number 13. Brand equals the marketplace divided by promises multiplied by competitive advantages minus jargon plus slogan. I can tell you, Sue, that I gave this 10-minute talk earlier this week at Tuesday at my Provisors group, Downtown 5. I got on my feet for 10 minutes after everybody did their thing. The group leader, Juan, he asked me, hey, Jeff, can you do a little member spotlight? And I said, yeah, but only if it benefits everybody else in the group as well. So why don't I talk about bring out your brand, which will bring out my brand. And then I'll let everybody know that if they want to be the featured member spotlight in future months, that I'm happy to help them bring out their brand. Right. So it was really wonderful. 10-minute talk. Stella's PowerPoint was beautiful. The way that it showed up on the screen. I might be able to screen share and bring that up in a minute, but we introduced this formula. And now the next several tips are breaking down elements. So, the week before this, we talked about the difference between a brand and branding. And now we see where brand shows up in this equation. We talked about the marketplace and getting divided into segments by promises. But then we had to ask, well, what counts? What counts as a promise? And among all the things that we talked about, we remember the ask method: attention gaining, sensational, and keepable. Right? We want our promises to speak to the pain people want to get out of or the pleasure people want to get into. We want to make the biggest promises that we know that we can, right? Because we really want to get people engaged with the possibility of being a solution. And then, of course, we need to make sure that it's keepable. Can we keep it? Again, it's not legal, it's marketing, right? So the contract will back up all the legalities and all the compliance. But basically, like, hey, as long as you show up and as long as you do your part, and as long as you stay consistent, I promise I can help you with this, or I promise I can help you with that. And one of the brand promises that I'm excited about lately, it's in my face. I'm getting ready to leave for the Bahamas next week. Tuesday night, it's Friday now, just 3 nights from now, I'm going to leave for the Bahamas and be a supporting coach and speaker at a retreat for health practitioners, mostly chiropractors, but not only chiropractors, right? And it's very easy to say to the event organizers, hey, I can increase the engagement, credibility, and revenue at your event, right? Because it's just wonderful. It's just clean to be clear about the promises, right? What counts as a promise, and to practice making promises, and to get like as comfortable as I am saying my name. I want to be comfortable making promises to the marketplace. But again, I'm going to have different promises, which is going to divide my marketplace into different market segments. I'm going to make a different promise to a director of HR than I am to an event planner. I'm going to make a different promise to an aspiring and emerging coach than I am to, right? A dean of a university that might want me to give a visiting lecture on the integrity game. So we want to, we'll get into knowing audience and all of that stuff down the road. But that was 2 weeks ago. And then last week, we broke down the CA's part, competitive advantages. We talked about difference-making differentiation. I love the irony that just my fingerprint, is enough to differentiate me from everybody else in the world, according to the laws of physics. But according to the laws of marketing, just having a different name or a tax identification number isn't enough. We need our differentiation to be difference making. We need it to be competitive. We need to be better or different than anybody else that's also competing with us for the problems that we want to solve in the world, right? And so that takes us, and how's that for a point of review? And that takes us to today's tip, which is to make it simple, right? And Sue, as I, before we get into the word for word, I'm just going to let everybody else know out there that when we're reading from a book, we want to put transition language. We want to escort the reader from one tip to the next. So at the end of one tip or at the beginning of another tip, there's this transition language that's really good in a book, but it may not be applicable here as we read online. And I think that's true today because there's a number of bullet points right here that summarize how we got to where we are. Sue, when we decide to read word for word, I think you could just pick it up from the bubble of your dialogue that gets us into the tip. But before we go word for word, what say you about the review of where we're at and how we got here and where we're headed, or anything else about what we're working on right now?
What comes to mind is the absolute value that we're offering, and that whoever chooses to engage with us, read the book, come online, join the conversation is going to find from our conversations. And as you said earlier, it applies to both speakers and non-speakers alike. I have found it really powerful to review these tips, particularly in branding and what is a brand, what makes it up, the components. And I love the formula. I love being able to do that deep dive into those components. It helps so much to frame, well, what is a brand? And out of that, what action can we take in particular areas to bring our brand together in a meaningful way that we can take ourselves out to the market and be relevant, be impactful, and be strong in our message. And I really think that's where what we're going through in these tips really helps us to really build that confidence to go, yeah, I've got, not only do I have a message, but how am I communicating that? And so I think that's where we're at, and where we're just continuing to strengthen that and amplify that.
Yeah, it's it's interesting because I'm the author of a lot of this stuff, and I mean, and when I'm thinking specifically about the integrity game, the original book I wrote, not just the tips that you and I dialogued around for this version, right? But I just this morning I looked at a little printout of the integrity game workbook that was printed on half-size pages, so it was basically the sheets were this big, and I was going through and I saw notes that I was jotting down, and I had an idea and a project in my mind, and I just saw my own handwriting on my own printout of the integrity game workbook, working through the idea using the integrity game. And now, truth be told, I just set it aside and I didn't look at it again, but I found it this morning. I'm like, oh yeah, hey, if I ever want to get back and really commit to this project, I've captured my ideas right here, and it's there. And so now it clears up my head, and when I want to get to it, I'll get to it. And I don't know. It's like I was reminded of how helpful it was for me to review these tips and to constantly practice them and put them into. So that's really cool. I appreciate that. And I'm always late in doing this, but hello, everyone. I'm Jeff Klubeck, founder and author of the Integrity Game. Let's put my name up there on the board. But what we're really all about here is, like Sue said, is the amount of value that we believe we have to share with you guys. And so if you're taking time to watch live, I'm seeing some eyeballs rotate through the eyeball counter, or whether you're watching a recording wherever we've streamed this, thank you for taking time to see what value we have for you here. So again, as a matter of quick review, and let's go ahead and get into the word for word, and then we could dialogue for another half hour or so. But in this section, we want to remind you, tip number 11, don't be a spectator. Branding is an active process. Number 2, we want to know brand versus branding. So you're not really going to be branding yet. So then that's a lot of mistakes that people make, is they're branding, but they haven't figured out what the brand is. So they're putting stuff out, but they don't know what they're putting out. They're not sure how they're communicating. So now, this formula was created when I was working with people all around the world, Sue. You know this, being in Melbourne yourself, and you and I got to spend some time together. But we've got all of these testimonials here that you can see. That's kind of blurred out, but you can see all these testimonials in the front of the book from people all around the world that I use this formula with to help them bring out their brands and get them ready to go speak on big stages. So this is proven. I get to say it now. You ready? It's a proven formula. All right.
Yes.
Yeah, not scientifically, but anyway, I'm no scientist, that's for sure. Social scientist, not even close. I did one master's thesis, but I still don't consider myself a scientist. But what counts as a promise? Attention-getting, sensational, keepable. And then what counts as competitive advantage? Difference-making, differentiation. And now we want to keep it simple. So are you ready, Sue, to get us going word for word? Starting on page 77, if anybody is following at home, get a clue in 52 for speakers with Sue Mathieson.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for the reminder of where we're up to. And so as we read word for word in tip number 16, make it simple, I'm reading here, I love the discussion, but potential clients aren't going to want an essay from me to describe all that, as in the tips that we've talked about so far. So, Jeff, what do I do to get the message out there?
You are 100% correct that you have to make it simple, but we aren't really talking yet about the length of the messaging yet. Yes, we will always seek to be as brief as possible when marketing ourselves as speakers, but here we are talking about the minus jargon part of the equation. I don't care about the length of message yet. What I care about is identifying so we can get rid of anything that sounds like, quote, jargon. Identifying the jargon among the collection of ingredients my formula asks you to identify is critical to avoiding what I like to call curse of knowledge. It's when we have become so familiar with something that we've forgotten what it's like not to know. Under this curse, we cannot even see jargon for what it is. Jargon. Everything summarized above is truly the hard and perhaps most important part of working my equation or developing your brand. Still, when you do the work of listing out your market segments that are created by the promises that are powered by your competitive advantages, you might end up with a lot of jargon. You don't even need an essay worth to turn off your prospects or audience, because all it takes is one word of jargon to create that feeling of not knowing what something means. Jargon will either repel someone's attention or turn it from interest to upset when people defend their egos from not understanding a term or concept. This very simple tip is to make it simple by identifying all of the jargon that will not be readily understood by the marketplace, by your market segments, by your target market, prospects, and audiences. This is the jargon audit that gets you ready to replace it all with slogans instead.
I've experienced many situations where conversations have almost felt like they were in another language, simply because of the jargon words being used. It does nothing to draw you into the conversation. And I can see that as a speaker, when building your brand, using jargon would disengage your audience in no time.
We are well on the way to crafting an amazing brand. B equals MP divided by P's times CA's minus J plus S. But we're not quite done. There is one more letter in the formula that we need to cover. Drum roll, please. Enter my favorite piece of the puzzle, sloganeering. So we're done reading the tip now word for word, and I'm immediately putting the formula back up in view. Right? What we were talking about today is this minus J part. And what we're going to talk about next week is adding the S. Now, the joke landed, Sue. The joke landed when I was on my feet the other day, delivering this in quick 10 minutes, delivering this equation. I said, hey, everyone, I'm such a communication guy. I have math envy. So the closest I ever want to get to doing arithmetic is putting in the basic functions of basic arithmetic just to pretend that I know a thing or two about math. But this is as close as I want to get. And everybody laughed. So as such a communication guy, I have math envy. And that was a little bit more of a racy joke, but it was still kind of clean, and it went over and it landed very good. But the idea, where I may not be good at math, I am really good at metaphor. And I really want people to understand that we are going to divide the big pizza into its slices with our different promises. We want to know all of the things that we can do for people, which will cut our marketplace into segments. Now, if we know what our competitive advantages are, we're going to amplify, multiply, right? So that it works, right? I've shot my brand promises from the rooftops if I know what my promises are and I know what my advantages are. But in the process with this tip today, the minus J part, when people are starting this from brand new, I said, all right, make a list of promises. Okay, now what does that mean? Make a list of market segments that your marketplace is cut up into. So this for person A, what's your promise? What's your competitive? Now make a list of all the things you do better than anybody else. Make a list of all the things you do that nobody else does. Do, have, can do, right? I have a master's degree. I have 22 years experience teaching and getting people past the fear of public speaking. I've spoken in 12 countries. You understand? These are advantages for me. But I need to get a complete list of all of my advantages, a complete list of all of my promises, and a complete list of all of my market segments. And when I'm endeavoring to get all of that out of my head onto the whiteboard, a lot of it's going to come out in jargon. right? Does that mean, imagine a whiteboard full of market segments, promises, and advantages. And now we got to find, like if somebody was working with me, they'd find where I put on there, well, I can replace limiting beliefs with empowering alternatives and condition that to a point of transformation. And my coach is going to go, X out all of that jargon and say, you mean you do a checkup from the neck up? Yeah. And so next week, we're going to head to my favorite part of this equation, which is adding the sloganeering, the wordsmith, the fun part. It's so great to stand on my feet at the end of a 10-minute talk and say, hey, nothing is insurmountable when I'm holding you accountable.
Yeah.
It's so great at the end of a 10-minute talk to say, well, the difference between me and other coaches out there is that I lead with love. I deliver hardcore accountability on a plate of I love you. And at the end to say, there's plenty of people in the world running around going for the jugular, but I go for the hugular. And these slogans are landing. When I say I want to make accountability non-threatening, or I deliver soft skills for strong leaders, all of these slogans hit and land. And now if they want to learn about the jargon, they can come and get into an appointment with me and get into a sales funnel or a consultative, process. But it's fun to play this game, and it's fun to not just talk every week about it, but to do it in my real career every day of my life, right? And see the results and see the impact and see people coming up to me. And I was able to say, this is another thing that landed the other day on my feet, Sue. I said, hey, everyone, we're in a networking group together. It's Provisors. It's a national group, right? And just here in San Diego, there's 5 groups downtown, and all of there's groups everywhere. And I don't know if they're international presence yet, but I haven't looked into that. But anyway, it's like, hey, everybody, we all, if you go to one Provisors group per month, that's the one time that you have to introduce yourself. Then you're going to get put into a troika with 2 other people. So then you're going to go meet in, a troika, a threesome, and then you're going to have to, still, right? That's only if you go to one. And if you guest at other groups, now, every time you guest, you got to get up on your feet and represent yourself, and then you're going to be right. So are we just, hello, I'm a cardboard, or can you grab our attention and say something sensational and create some curiosity and some mystery, or something memorable, something sticky, something, right? Or are you just showing up saying, well, I'm the blankety blank in the group, and since I'm in the group, you all have to refer to me. It's not going to work that way. We have to know our brand, and we have to be able to brand ourselves. So I was able to tell everybody, hey, if your introductions, if the way you introduce yourself increased by 2%, if you got 2% better, 4% better, after a year of introducing yourself at 4% better, would that land one more meeting, one more introduction, one more meeting, one more client? If you just made a 2 to 5% increase, 2 to 5% increase in how you're communicating, who you are and what you do and what we can expect from you. And everybody's like, yeah, that would make, all right, cool. Then let me tell you about my formula. Right. Wow. So it was really wonderful. And I want to give a shout out to, if I can, Stella. Stella, and let me put her name up here. Stella is a marketing apprentice that I recruited a couple years ago before I even launched the Integrity Game book. And she did the interior design for our book. But it was easy because she's been working with all of my stuff for a couple of years. And I would just want to share this with you real quick, if I may. Let's see here. Yeah. Interesting. Hang on. Let me go back. Give me a second. I can do this. I know I can do share screen. I'm still getting used to. All right. Tell me if you could. Can you see my screen, Sue?
It's coming up. Yeah.
You see? So I did this just April 16th, a couple of days ago. I just edited this for Provisors Downtown and formula for a brand. I just think can you see my screen right now? Brand, right? Equals the marketplace divided by promises, multiplied, amplified by our competitive advantages. But don't just spray and pray. Make sure you eliminate the jargon first. And next week, we're going to talk about adding slogan. That was it. That's it. Like, how beautiful does this look? I'm so happy about it, right? That I'm going to stop sharing now. Oh,
fantastic.
Yeah. Did I stop sharing? Am I back? No more sharing? Yeah. So, it was just everything, in today's tip. What is today's tip? It's make it simple. Right? So what a simple PowerPoint, simple way of introducing the complexity of optimizing our brands, right? and our messaging. And so what, those are a couple things that I wanted to say after the tip reading itself. What about you, Sue? What have you got? Questions, comments, anything?
A question. You've talked about, from your own experience, removing the jargon and you shifted, say, the phrase limiting beliefs, and it's check up from the neck up for you. Is there, or are there any other examples of removing jargon that come to mind from some of those speakers that you've helped and that you've worked with? Or is that?
Yeah. If I understand your question correctly, what I'm not thinking about is any one specific student that I've worked with and helped with one specific piece of jargon that they were committed to that we had to remove. What I think about is more categorically about let me introduce this concept. It's kind of on the periphery, I think, of what you're asking about, but I think it's in the ballpark. And it's kind of fun. You know how I am with sloganeering and wordsmithing, right? So I see jargon. Stay with me on this. Are you ready?
Yep.
I see jargon as a comfort zone or security blanket, or maybe at best, set of training wheels. Do you understand? The psychology of the person that leans on, wants, feels they need their jargon, isn't confident enough yet about some other aspect of the process, where their credibility, it's a function of insecurity, right? That they really feel. Yeah. And so if I put out jargon, they don't even know that they're doing it. You understand? It's subconscious defense mechanism is what I want to get into, right? Ego defense is always alive. We are always attacking or ignoring what we feel may be a threat, right? And when we're marketing ourselves, especially for people that aren't quote unquote natural born marketers, they're threatened. They're terrified. I'll say it. They're scared blankless, right? Especially somebody who is an analytical by nature, somebody who's detailed, they're facts driven, they're scientific, they're systematic, they're right. But if they have to market themselves, right, now they're going to want to lean on, and in sales trainings, you hear it talked about this way. So don't sell features, sell benefits, right? So a lot of times what people want to do is they'll say, well, and this is the balance, right? We need to know what our competitive advantages are, but not all, and all competitive advantages are features. But we don't need to keep going on features. We need to figure out which features need to be communicated as advantages as to why somebody would want to work with us instead of, why would somebody hire us as a speaker instead of any other speaker?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Why was I asked to go to the Bahamas next week to work with these health practitioners instead of any other speaker that they could have?
Yes.
Right. Why did my group leader ask me to be the first person to do a member spotlight instead of anybody else in the group? Right. Because I amplify my features that make me selectable among all the noise out there. Right. But to answer your question, I mean, it would be funny if I pulled up my GoDaddy account and I screen shared and I showed you the list of 150 domain names, right? That I would come up with, for people once I'm, and these are the ones that, never mind the ones that I don't have in my account are the ones where oh my God, that's it. Oh my God, where they've taken and run with it. Right. One of the people that you may know of, you may be connected with her from back in the day. Her name's Jennifer. She's here in Southern California. She's a PR person. And I remember one day sitting with her, we came up with it. And, she was telling me all the stuff that she does in PR. I'm like, well, what makes you different? What makes you better? She's like, I get people engaged. I get people engaged. I really increase engagement. I'm like, well, why don't you just call it engagement PR? And she went, what? Engagement PR. Engagement public relations. That's And we just sat there in silence for a minute. And we looked it up and it was available.
Okay.
And I swear, I've never seen, I see the goosebumps where people see it in writing and it's available on GoDaddy and it lands and they get these chills, like, because then what happens is they start to see the multiplication. They start to feel the amplification part. You see the X, the multiplication side? Like, oh my God, engagement PR. I'm promising that I'll get people engaged. I'll increase engagement. I'm engaged. I get you engaged. That's what we all want, is engagement. So that, I mean, am I answering your question? I don't even remember what she called herself before.
No. Yeah. You are, but you are answering it actually in a way that I wasn't quite expecting. But what I'm really coming to appreciate in your answer is that understanding of jargon being the language that we might use, and it can often be industry based, where you have found a comfort level because you talk the same language as peers or colleagues or people that you tend to meet up with regularly. And it does become that safety zone. But but in doing that, you're losing so many of those other components that are in the formula of those competitive advantages of your differentiation. You're losing your brand, essentially, because you're not identifying yourself as, why would someone choose you over someone else? And
you're miscommunicating. Okay, so it's I'm trying to set something up visually. Give me a second here.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say speakers and then prospects. So what I want you to imagine, I'm going to set this up in a banner here. I don't know if it'll come across as well as I want it to, but let's see. Ready? Okay, pretty cool. What do you see? What you see here? It's a speaker's ego defense, jargon, and then prospects ego, or marketplace or audience ego defense. You follow? So jargon is sitting in the middle. When jargon is sitting in the middle of the brander, the person branding themselves, marketing themselves to try to get speaking gigs or advance their career, be seen known as a speaker, and and then it's right in the middle of the speaker, the marketer, and then on the other side is the audience or the marketplace or the prospect. So here's what happens. The speaker uses jargon because they feel insecure. So they're defending their ego from the potential that they may get rejected, or it may not be good enough, or what if they can't afford it, or what if they don't understand, or any of the fears that any of us have about sales. Because I don't even care. The best salesperson in the world is still afraid of sales. Okay, you understand what I'm getting at? Sales and public speaking is not much different. But you understand what I'm saying here, Sue? Right?
Yes.
So we're naturally, ego defense is like emotional fight or flight. Right. The same thing. If I heard a buzz right here, I'd swat and duck immediately, even if it's a fly instead of a bee. So we're hardwired and spring loaded to attack or run from anything that we perceive consciously, subconsciously, or otherwise, accurately or inaccurately, doesn't matter. Anything we perceive as a threat is going to trigger an attack or a run. Right. And so what we don't realize subconsciously is that we're protecting ourselves from rejection by attacking our audience with jargon.
Yeah.
Like, I'm smarter than you. You can't reject me. That's on the one side. But then I wrote it here, I tried to capture it in writing in the tip. But on the other side, are you ready? Here's what it says. Jargon will either repel someone's attention or turn it from interest to upset when people defend their egos from not understanding a term or concept. Does that make sense? So
yes, Yes.
Yeah, like it says here, you don't even need an essay worth of words to turn off your prospects or audience, because all it takes is one word of jargon to create that feeling of not knowing what something means. So if you've got the speaker using jargon subconsciously to attack the audience before they can be rejected, then they'll never stop themselves from throwing out that one word that provokes ego defense on the other side, because I didn't know what that word means. What? He said equifinality. What the is that? Oh, Mr. Master's degree. Oh, Mr. San Diego State. Think you're going to talk over my head. Well, I'm going to go down the street and talk to another speaker that knows how to get me out of my own way without offending me with all this jargon. It makes sense?
Yeah.
Right. And it's not that I don't use big words. It's not that I haven't ever used academic terms before. And, but I try to set it up like, hey, ready for the academic term? And then they lean in and like, da 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 da. I'm like, all right, what that really means is blah, blah, blah. So I'm hyper aware of this, right? Or, 20 years ago or 20, however many years ago when I was getting my master's degree and I was immersed in the culture and all it was jargon, academic jargon. I realized like, oh my God, how come my mom doesn't want to hang out with me? How come my friends don't want to hang out with me? How come because I was in another world.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And so it's really important to work with people that can get us out of that rabbit hole and help us understand the deeper drivers of inner psychology and what's really going on behind the scenes of communication, right? When it comes to this marketing piece. And so I hope this helps, right? Do you see how ego defense, like jargon is the speaker's ego defense, but it also triggers the audience's ego defense.
And what I was just thinking then too is that as a speaker, when we take the effort to move out of that comfort zone of using that language that we see as jargon, crafting our message into what we will talk about more next week, the sloganeering, invites the audience to engage, and I would say almost says to them, you matter. And so I want you to really understand what I'm sharing here. It's important for me to get the message across. And because you take the time to do that in language that is meaningful and simple, it lands way more effectively.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're talking about some basics here. Do you see my entertained face? Like, oh, Jeff's thinking about something Jeff's entertaining himself right now. What is it, Jeff? Do you see it in my face? Master level is not only get out of our own way and get our own jargon out of the way and replace it with slogan with something that's landing. But I like to show off every now and then and use other people's jargon. When I'm speaking, I'll use real estate jargon or financial advisor jargon or legal jargon. So I'm not any of those things, but when I can use their jargon and they see their jargon coming out of my mouth, now I really get their attention, right? And it's fun. And for those of you that are maybe tuning in now or coming in late, we're continuing to break down this formula: our brands equal the marketplace, which gets divided by our promises that we then amplify because of our competitive advantages, but not before we replace the jargon with slogan. So today is the minus jargon, the minus J piece that we've been talking about, which is keep it simple, make it digestible, be biographical rather than autobiographical. Speak to the self-talk of your prospects and your market segments. This is back to why the value. It's going to be so much easier to come up with new slogans and get rid of my jargon if I've paid attention to what my market segments are.
Yes.
Instead of just saying I need to market myself out there to like the whole entirety of the pizza. Like, no. I've got HR professionals. I got conference organizers. I've got deans and decision makers at progressive universities. I've got aspiring and emerging coaches, aspiring and emerging speakers. I've got solopreneurs. I've got attorneys. I've got life service professionals. I've got. So when I actually identify these segments and they make them real because I've identified them, it's so much harder to lean on my jargon because somewhere in my brain, I know that it's not going to land with them. But if I never identify my market segments, I might just stay relying on my jargon. I hope that makes sense. And so we're talking, yeah. And so let me just say this before I get into last call. We have, by the way, if anybody wants to come in and join the conversation now that I've done last call, you want to jump on and have 5 minutes with us. But what I really wanted to show is, hey, we have a free Bring Out Your Brand report. It's one of these deals that you give us your email and we'll give you a PDF. Okay. But you click through that PDF. We hope there's enough value in there for you to get to the end where you can book a free strategy call where you can work with myself or Sue, an Integrity Game certified coach, to help bring out your brand. You want to soundboard, you want to ideate, you want to practice communicating it, you want to whatever you want to do. We're here to help in any way that we can, and so we want to get your email address so we can market to you in the future. But we're willing to give you a free PDF in exchange and then give you a free phone call as well. Usually in our ecosystem, one phone call leads to a second free session. That's what we normally do, is 2 free sessions, but you only get the second one if you like the first one, and you only get the first one, you go through the funnel. So we need your email address. That's what it is. We're being honest about that. We want your email. Give us your email address. Anyway. All right. So that's that. The other thing is back to chalk one up for honesty. Give us your email address. We'll give you a PDF. Deal? Okay. All right.
And bring
the other
lots
thing
of
is
value.
Save the date for anybody that's going to be here in Southern California, San Diego in the summertime. June 25th is when Sue and I will be doing, it may not just be Sue and I, but if you want to hang out with Sue and I, there may be other authors on the panel. We're putting it all together right now, but we're going to reboot this thing called Authors Hour. It's at the University Club at downtown San Diego, where the University Club every year, they raise money for the Lamp of Learning to give $20,000 worth of scholarships to underprivileged students. And I'm working with the book club and the sports and entertainment club to get sponsorship. And we want to have a photographer and videographer up there so I can market to my colleagues and provisors and get everybody up there for headshots and video testimonials and to hear about the process of writing books, publishing books, marketing books, selling books. What do you do with a book now that you have a book? And hopefully Sue and I won't be the only experts there. We can get that panel stocked with a couple of other authors that are members at the University Club to make it a robust event and try to get as many people winning at the event as possible. June 25th, save the date. And having said all of that, I think it's just time for last call. Comments, questions, jokes, riddles, haikus, limericks, or expressions of gratitude.
Always gratitude. Absolutely gratitude. And I always lead these sessions picking up just another nugget, another bit of gold that I can take away and continue working with. So I love it. I love showing up every week, and thank you for, once again, the opportunity to write this book in the first place, to go through the process, but to have the exploration and the fun as we move along each week. So,
well, yeah, likewise. Let me send some thank you back your way, because guess what? Very often in these sessions, I come up with something new that I've never come up with before. And, talk about scuba diving on the -J. I've never come up with this. I could already see communicating to Stella, saying, Stella, will you create a graphic that shows jargon in the middle of this ego defensive pissing contest between marketers and audiences? Or,
yes.
Right? Like that's a valuable frame to show people when we go deep diving. And then what do I mean by that? Well, let me go back to screen sharing real quick. I have in my mind, and for those of you that may be interested in having myself or Sue lead online branding workshop for you, or come on site to your organization to lead your people through a branding workshop, that PowerPoint that I showed earlier, this would be a workbook that we would hand out to participants so participants can follow along and take notes and fill in their blanks. We know that that's brand is the marketplace divided by promises, multiplied by competitive advantages, minus jargon, plus slogan. So we've created a place for people to facilitate their note taking around elements of these pieces, and then even a full page to really start flushing out some sentences, some hooks, some keywords, some phrases, right? And so this is a very simple workbook that captures note-taking and ideating and brainstorming and drafting and all of the working of the shop. That's why they call it they don't call it a listen shop, they call it a workshop. And we all know that they don't call it a sit there and daydream shop, they call it a workshop, right? But the reason that I'm bringing this up right now is because this full page right here is where we'd have the opportunity to write, the speaker over here and the audience over here, and each side's ego defense is being pushed and pulled by this jargon thing that we don't want to create questions in the minds of the audience. We don't want to repel them. Look at how beautiful and simple this graphic is, right? And it really gets us thinking about, am I off-putting? Am I using words that I understand and sound good in my office, but once I get out of my office, people have no idea what the hell I'm doing? Or they might know what I'm doing, but they don't know what I'm doing in such a way that I'm motivated, to work with them versus anybody else that also does that. I'm going to stop sharing now for a second and say, we have to remember, just because I join a networking group and everybody's in the same group as I am and I see them once a month, doesn't mean that I'm obligated to do business with them or refer business to them. They're competing with everybody that does what they do in the entirety of my life. Right? So hello, provisors, I'm the new guy. Come and talk to me and meet with me. And but just because you're in provisors too, that's not enough of a competitive advantage. It helps. It definitely helps. But it's not enough of a competitive advantage to overcome my 30 years of working with other professionals I know, like, trust, and have a track record of doing good business. So I need to know what it is about you that's going to outweigh all of that if I'm going to start taking chances with my leads, my clients, my ecosystem, and start referring business to you, right? So we have to be aware of that. It's not entitlement. It's not given. We don't just join a group and hold out our hand and get a bunch of business. We are still responsible for making sure that people know what to expect from us. And, if any of you out there are struggling with any of this, I would love to help. You can tell how passionate and excited I get about this, because it's fun at the end of the day when we get to the ad slogan part, but pulling out promises, market segments, and competitive advantages can be difficult, right? Once we get it out, now we got all this beautiful jargon that we can whack-a-mole on all the jargon and then replace it with slogan.
That's fantastic. Fantastic. So thank you for another wonderful session. And what are you looking forward to over the weekend now?
I'm getting ready for my trip to the Bahamas. I might see one of my son's baseball games. My wife is back in town. She's been traveling a lot this year. So she's back in town. So I'm looking forward to, a warmer, I'm just going to say it, a warmer bed. It's going to be warmer in the bed.
Nice.
Yeah. It's warming up in general. Spring is in the air here in the United States, but, and even when my wife, God bless her, even when she's in town, I go to bed and she's still working, and I wake up and she's out of bed working because of all the time zones that she's got to deal with around the world. So even when she's in town, sometimes the bed's still cold. But my point is, I'm looking forward to I'm looking forward to family time. That includes, some mutual friends of ours asked us to go out for dinner and drinks. But I've got a whole collection of to-dos. I call them micro to-dos, micro tasks, that I want to knock out. They're nothing major, but I'll feel really good if I work my way through them. But everything points towards the Bahamas, leaving for the Bahamas Tuesday night. And I really want to make sure I do a great job and I'm totally well rested and totally zen and ready to be my best at that event. It's the first time working with these people. And I've promised that I would increase the engagement, credibility, and revenue of their event. And I intend to deliver, and I intend to over-deliver. But I got to keep it simple as I over-deliver. Keep it simple. That was today's tip. All right.
Fantastic. That sounds amazing.
How about you, Sue? Any major, huge plans for the weekend before we dismiss for today?
Opposite end of the scale in terms weather-wise, of course, we're coming into autumn or fall, as you would describe it. And one of my passions is photography. So I am going to just have a little bit of time out There's
Do
hopefully
you get seasons in Melbourne? Do you get color changes and everything?
yeah, and the trees are beautiful at the
Yeah.
moment. So
We
I'm
don't get a whole lot of that in San Diego, so I'm in admiration.
yeah, yeah. So it is. We've got some beautiful trees that change color, and so I'm hopefully heading into the city to our botanical gardens,
Okay.
and just spend some time doing some photography and yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. So for those of you that are connected with Sue on social media, you may be lucky enough to catch a glimpse of pictures that she posts. And for those of you that are lucky enough to be connected with us here on LinkedIn, thank you for taking any time to drop in. If you've ever to drop in live or watching the recording, please get a hold of us. Let us know if we can help you with anything. We love working on these things. We love, bringing out really important brands because all of us have problems to solve in the marketplace, and it's not the marketplace's fault if we're not doing a good job communicating how we do that. So make sure you go through the funnel, tinyurl.com. TIG is the integrity game. BOYB is bring out your brand. You'll get the PDF in exchange for the email address. But next week, we're going to continue in this section with tip number 17 overall, which is going to be addressing the sloganeering piece of this formula. And I don't have anything else to say for today. Sue, thank you as always for bringing out my best, my jovial self on Fridays. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Oh, by the way, next week I will be in the Bahamas. So we may need to make a schedule adjustment. We may need to make a timing adjustment. So keep your eyes open for that. I'm going to put my thoughts around that, look at the agenda, maybe something I have to do at night after things all said and done, or super early in the morning, because I'm committed to, an agenda on Friday at this event. So I'll be in communication with you about that, and we'll make sure it's included in our promotions for next week's tip. But the show will go on, one tip a week every week in 2024. Get a Clue in 52 for speakers with co-author and certified integrity game coach, Sue Mathieson. All right, Sue. We'll see you next week at some point. All right. Thank you.
Have a great week.
You too. Bye-bye now.
Take care. Okay. Bye.